Adrian, like I said, is a vampire. We're going to just back up. I'm just going to start this whole thing over because I've made it very confusing and I've even lost my own train of thought on what I'm trying to say here. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with the books that I would like to read in 2024. So I do this video every single year. A lot of people do this video. It's like their yearly TBR. I do it. I've been doing it since probably the very first year on YouTube. I didn't do it, but after that I've had some sort of list. And per Kelsey fashion, there is a theme to this list. So I did kind of tease it a little bit when I talked about my goals for the year. So if you didn't see that, don't worry, I just kind of talked about it a little bit, but now we're going to go into the actual books that are on this list. Sorry, this video is kind of late. Basically, all of my beginning of year content has been pushed back a little bit, but we're here finally to talk about the books. So this list, I have 15 books on this list, which is ridiculous, I know, but the point of that is because what ends up happening, at least it's happened for the last couple of years, is I start really strong. The beginning of the year is great. I'm flying through those books. I've got certain books that I want to read at certain times of the year, so I put those off, and then we get to the end of the year and I only have like 1 or 2 books on this list left, and I'm not in the mood for them, or they're just not at the top of my TBR. I'm not feeling them for one reason or another, and so I either A, am forced to read them, and then they end up being an okay experience because I'm not in the mood for them, or I just don't read them. So what I've decided to do is I've made a list of 15 with the goal of reading 10 so that I have a bigger variety to choose from, because if I've got a lot of options, I feel less pigeonholed into, like, especially when it comes to the end of the year. But they are all sequels. So every single book on this list is the second in a series, and it's a series that I have started. There's a lot of duologies actually on this list. There's only one book on this list that isn't out yet, and it comes out in April, but everything else on this list is out. And so this is my way of hopefully helping myself continue with series. I know we say it every year. All us book people say it every year that we'd like to be better at reading the series that we've started. So this is my way of hopefully helping myself do that. I have some books on here in the hopes that they will spur some Simplify My Series videos that I started last year, but mostly these are just books that I really enjoyed the first one and I want to continue. And for some reason for me, picking up the second book is 10 times harder than picking up the third or fourth book in the series. So that's my goal. Let's just dive in. All right, there is literally no order to this list except for how I thought of them. So the first book on this list is Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This is the sequel to Belladonna, which I read in the fall. I think it was either September or October. I can't remember which one it was, but I read the first one because I got it in a fairy loot and it just sounded really good. It felt like a good fall book. I fell head over heels in love with it, but I went out and immediately purchased the UK cover of the second one, which I will be doing with the third one, but the third one doesn't come out until later, like at the end of the year. I really want to say it comes out in like August or something. So my goal is to finish this one before that one comes out. In the first book, we follow our main character, Signa, who is connected to death in some way. Everyone around her always dies. Her parents died when she was really, really young, which kind of set her on this course of having a bunch of different guardians because her parents had a lot of money. And so when she reaches the right age, I think she has to be 19 or 20. It's not 18 like most books are, so I'm trying to remember exactly when it is. But once she reaches that age, then she will inherit her fortune, or her parents' fortune, and whatever guardian is with her at that moment will get a little bit of the money for housing her and stuff. So all the guardians take her in, even though they can't stand her, and each guardian in their respective ways ends up being killed in some way. And so the book starts with her most recent guardian who passes away, and she ends up being sent to her very last relatives, which are like super far cousins, and this cousin's wife just passed away, and so he is absolutely distraught, and he's got 2 kids, a son and a daughter, And the wife was thought to have passed away from this like ridiculous illness, and the daughter is suffering from the same thing. And so while she's there, she has like I said, she's really connected to death, and so she has these powers where she's able to see spirits and ghosts. And while she's in this house, she runs into the spirit of her cousin's wife, who is convinced that she was murdered and the same thing is happening to her daughter. And so she like begs Cigna to basically help figure out what's going on. So it's a murder mystery in a way. There's some fantastical elements to it. And I liked the first one. It had a very clear ending, but of course the epilogue pushed the story farther. So that's what we're going to get in this one. We have some other magical creatures or mythical creatures because like I said, Cigna is close to death. And so she ends up teaming up with death to figure out what's going on. And so there's some other mythical beings like that have showed up. And so this one is a different murder mystery. So really enjoyed the first one. Very excited about the second one. The next one is one that's very, very similar to that one. I read it about the same time. I want to say I read it in October because I read it for a vlog. And that is Queen of Myth and Monsters by Scarlett St. Clair, which is the second book to King of Battle and Blood. I always forget what it's called. King of Battle and Blood, which I read in October for my vampire vlog, which I wasn't expecting a whole lot going into that one because I'd read the Hades and Persephone series, or at least I'd read the first book of the Hades and Persephone series by that author and was not particularly impressed and was very worried about this one. Fell in love to the point that I immediately bought the second one. And I do believe there is a third one, but I can't remember when it comes out. I want to say it comes out this year, but I might be wrong. We don't even have a cover yet. So we'll see with that one. But this story follows, it's part of the Isolde and Adrian series. Adrian is a vampire, and he's kind of the king of the vampires. And so he's been trying to take over the world, basically, is the best way I can describe it. He's been taking over lands, and he has reached the land where Isolde's father controls. And instead of going to war with Adrian, he decides to strike up a deal and kind of give this land over to Adrian in the hopes that it will still protect his people. And Adrian's like, great, love this. I will do this. My stipulation is your daughter, I want to marry her. And so Isolde, who cannot stand the vampires, cannot stand him, hates them with every fiber of her being, agrees to save her people. And then it's their relationship as they go back and they travel back to his lands, like his lands of the vampires, and they learn some stuff along the way because obviously nothing is what it appears. So everything that she's been taught about the vampires is wrong. So I loved it. Took over my heart and soul. I'll pin the vlog above if you'd like to check it out because I literally couldn't stop raving about it. So I picked the second one and I'm obsessed with this cover. I think it's just absolutely beautiful. So I'm excited to dive into the second one because we had some cliffhangers of sorts at the end of the first one, and there's a big bad who's big badding, and I need answers. So it's probably one of my favorite covers at the moment. I can't stop staring at it. It's amazing. The next one is more of a companion sequel than a sequel, but it's still one that I want to read, and that is Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the second and final book in the Bellinger Sisters series. The first one being It Happened One Summer, which I read last year, and it literally is probably, I can't remember if it made it onto my favorites, but it was one of my favorites last year. And I loved it. So that book follows, so both of these books follow this set of sisters. Piper and Hannah are the two sisters. And Piper is like the party girl. She goes out, she like always gets in trouble, and her stepdad is done with it. And so he sends her to this little fishing town, to this bar, I think it's a bar, that their late father owned, and he's been keeping up for them. And so while she's there, and Hannah goes with her sister goes with her, she runs into a guy, and the first story is her like romance and relationship. The second one follows Hannah, which is the other sister, who is involved in the I want to say screenwriting world, and this is a romance between her and a guy named Fox, who is the best friend of our main character from the first book. So she's back in the fishing town, I think to help out her job, and she has a big crush on her boss, which doesn't pan, and then Fox is there to help her out. I loved the first one. I fell head over heels. I didn't expect anything going in. So I'm a little nervous going into this one just because I had like very low expectations, which is probably why I liked the first one so much. And this one has higher expectations. So I'm a little afraid it's not going to live up. But I love Tessa Bailey's writing, at least from the first book in the series. I'm very excited to dive into this one. And who doesn't love a good contemporary romance? The next one is the one book that is not out yet, and that is The Hylock Queen by Hannah Whitten. This is the sequel to The Foxglove King, which I read last year. I want to say it was again somewhere in the fall, but I might have made that part up. And this one comes out, if my system is correct, if Goodreads is correct, April 9th. So we've got a few months before this one comes out, but I do already have, I think, the audiobook pre-ordered on Audible because I think I have the first one on Audible. I'm really weird and I don't like owning parts of series on Audible, just like I don't like owning parts of series physically. I'm an odd bird, you guys. Anyway, the first book in the series follows Lore, who has grown up in the catacombs of this city, and she has made her life kind of being a poison runner, which is obviously illegal. And so one day she's got some powers that's connected to the under catacombs and the dead and stuff like that. And so one day, while she's doing a run, she ends up getting caught by the king's men, and she gets caught because her powers show up. And so instead, thinking that she's just going to be carted off to this like awful prison or she's going to be killed, the king has other ideas and asks for her help because he thinks that there's an assassination plot or there's some stuff going on and he thinks that his son might be involved. So she and this priest pretend to be cousins, and she is enveloped into the court world where she is hopefully going to get to know the son, aka the prince, a little bit better. Huge things happen in this one. The end was startling. So this one's probably not one of the super high ones on this list as far as like excitement goes, but I'm still really interested in where the story is going to go. I'm not sure I need to physically own this one, but I do want to read it. So this is one on here too. The next one is another one I don't own, but it is out. And that is Ruthless Bows by Rebecca Ross, which is the sequel to Divine Rivals. I very much enjoyed Divine Rivals. I think I enjoyed it because I knew what I was getting into. A lot of people went into this one thinking it was going to be a huge fantasy book, and it is really just a historical fiction romance with a fantastical twist a little bit in the history. However, I do think based on how the first one ended, we are going to be getting a little bit more fantastical stuff in the second book. So I wasn't sure about this one until about halfway through. It follows these two rival writers who are part of the same newspaper, and they want to be war correspondents, and basically they are fighting for the same position, and due to some stuff that goes on, they end up both going to the front line. It's a little bit of a rivals, I'm not even sure I want to call it a hate to love because it's not quite. It's like a rivals to love story. And then there is a little bit of magical in the world building element because the war that's going on is between two gods. So you got some stuff going on, and I wasn't sure about this, and then I fell in love with the romance at the end of the book, and then cliffhanger. So this is only the sequel. There's no more after this one. It's a duology, so I'm excited to dive into this one at some point too. Next one is a really cute, easy one. That's Cutie and the Beast Volume 2. I read the first volume of this one last summer, fell head over heels, so I wanted to continue. It follows this boxer. It's a manga that follows a boxer and one of his biggest fans, basically. And he is always thought to have like male fans. He doesn't have a lot of female fans, and so she's really naive, and there is a little bit of an age gap between them, but it's a romance between the two of them, and it was very cute. I had to take some of it with a grain of salt. Like I said, the romance, there's an age gap, which is a little questionable, but it's not as bad as like the age gap that was in Dreaming Sun, in my opinion. That was a whole different situation. And they even address it. They don't like ignore the fact that there's an age gap. They address this age gap. It's one of the issues between the two of them. So I'm excited. Loved the first one. Super cute. Don't own it. Hopefully will. We'll see. I might get it from the library. It just kind of depends on where I can find it. But this one is just a fun little manga that I'd like to slip in somewhere. Next one, Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I loved Fourth Wing. I read it in the summer last year. It took over my life, like most people's did, and then kind of put me in a little bit of a slump. And then when this one came out in November, it was still part of that slump, so I never picked it up. So I'm hoping to pick this one up when the vibe is right. I'm not sure when that is. Like, even though there was a big cliffhanger and I have questions and I want to know the end, or like where we are in the second, like I want to know where the story goes, because I'm afraid to look at anything online. Like, I'm afraid to be spoiled for anything. I'm not really in the mood for it right now, so we'll see. I'm thinking that this one might be one that I get to maybe later in the year. We'll see how it goes, but I definitely want to get to this one at some point because I am invested in the series. I loved the first one so much, and I need answers. So here we are. The next one is another one that's kind of a companion sequel, and that is The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. This one is the companion sequel to The Spanish Love Deception, which I read last year and loved. I'm noticing that a lot of these, I read the first one last year. That's funny. I read that one, loved it. It was so much fun. It was amazing. And this one follows that main character's best friend, I want to say, and her brother or something. Like, there's a brother or a cousin that's related to one of the main characters in the first book. I can't remember which one it is, but it must be her, because her family's from Spain. So he comes to America and kind of needs a place to live and stay, and she is kind of having our main female lead is kind of having a like career crisis and figuring some stuff out, and so is revamping a lot of stuff. So it's the two of them, and they end up rooming together. Things go from there. I don't know a whole lot about what this one's about, but I loved the first one so much that it would be really fun to dive into this one as well, because I loved her writing, and I'm curious to see what she's going to do with these characters that we were introduced to. At least her. We were introduced to her. I'm not sure if we were introduced to him or not, but we were definitely introduced to her in the first book. So it's just a duology. There's not any more beyond that, and I really loved her writing, so I want to see if she's an author for me before I invest in more things by her. The next one is a Nora Roberts book, which is Tears of the Moon, which is the sequel in the Gallagher and Ardmore trilogy. This is a trilogy that follows three women and yes, it does follow 3 women and 3 men, but it is the Gallagher family. It's 2 brothers and a sister. So the third one, I think, follows the sister. This one specifically follows Sean, who is a talented songwriter, and a woman that has been in love with him forever. And so the 3 women in this series are really good friends, and so I'm interested to see where this one goes. Really enjoyed the first one. It takes place in Ireland, and it's a contemporary with a little bit of like a magical realism twist. I don't know if this one will have it, but the first one had one, because that was about like spirits and ghosts, whereas this one, I'm not sure that's going to play a part, but I loved it. Would love to continue with this because I have the entire trilogy, so I'd like to finish that one at some point. We then have the sequel, Never a Hero, which is by Vanessa Lynn, which is the sequel to Only a Monster. I don't know if there's any more beyond this. I can't remember if it's just a duology or if there's going to be more, but I have the second one. I picked up the special edition from Fairy Loot because I got the first one through Fairy Loot and picked that one up super randomly and really enjoyed it. So I would love to get to this one, and I just haven't yet. The book series, at least the first one, follows our main character Joan, who is spending her time in London with her mom's side of the family, and due to some circumstances, she ends up finding out that she is descendant from what they call monsters. It's basically a bunch of families that have this ability to time travel, and the time traveling is a little bizarre because it takes minutes or days, depending on how far you go in the future or in the past, off of other people. So there are monster hunters who think that this is absolutely evil. And so some stuff happens at the beginning of this book. Joan figures out she's descended from monsters, ends up teaming up with this guy from a different family who they are rivals, but they're running away from the same monster hunter. So it goes back in time, not a whole lot. It takes place in like the 90s. It's basic, like it takes place in the present, and then they travel back to the 90s. So it's just a little bit of a time jump, but it's really fascinating. I loved the world, the complexity of that moral dilemma of like time travel, but it takes time off of people's lives. Like that whole situation is very fascinating to me. So I would love to get to the sequel to that one. The next one is The Shadow Cabinet. Oh, I almost threw it. By Juno Dawson, which is the second in the HMRC, or the Her Majesty's Royal Coven trilogy. There's actually going to be 4 in this trilogy. There is a prequel that's coming out this year. So there's a trilogy and then like a prequel to it as well. But I loved the first one. HMRC was so good. I read it in the fall of 22. And so I got this one last year when it came out, and I just didn't make time for it, unfortunately. But the world that this is set in takes place in like the UK, and there are witches and warlocks, and the witches are the more powerful, so they have the governing body, or the HMRC, which to normal mundane humans looks like a boring tax department, but to the witches is their governing body. And so it follows these 4 different women who were really close when they were younger. They were kind of like in a coven themselves, and they learned about magic together. And then they've grown up. One of them is now the high priestess, or basically the ruling head of the HMRC. One of them is just a mom and wants a normal life. One of them is starting a smaller group about diversity because they don't consider the HMRC to be very diverse. And then one of them is living as a veterinarian and has been asked by the high priestess to help out this kid who is thought to possibly bring the end of days. So there's a prophecy going on, and it's the 4 of them having to reconnect, and there's a lot of conversation about trans rights and trans humans in this world. The author herself is trans, so it's a very interesting story, I find, especially because, like, while it is very heavy-handed in its political conversation around being trans, it does not deter from the plot itself. Like, they go together really, really well, but like the plot is so well fleshed out, the world is so well fleshed out, and there is a very big cliffhanger at the end of the first one. So I need answers, and I haven't made time for it. So I'm hoping to get to this one before the prequel comes out, because I'm very curious about that one, even though it doesn't follow anybody. That one follows like how the HMRC got started, but very excited about that. The next one is for my alien sci-fi romance lovers out there, and that is Freeing Luca by Victoria Aveline, which is the sequel to Choosing Theo, which is part of the Cocanian series. So I read Choosing Theo like 2 or 3 years ago, I want to say. I did an alien romance vlog. I did a monster romance vlog that just happened to have a couple of books that were about aliens, and I am not someone who usually gravitates towards like alien romances or monster romances. Like, they're fun little things that I like to throw in every once in a while, but they're never like my new favorite read, you know? And this one, Choosing Theo, became one of my new favorite reads. I love that book. And so this one is the sequel. It's a companion sequel. It does take place after the events, so like the overarching plot of the entire world, you do have to read the first one before you can read this one. But it follows a different family member. So each book in the series, and there are, I think, 7, follow 7 or 8, and they follow a different sibling of Theo, who he's got like so many brothers and sisters. It basically, I would check trigger warnings for this entire series because it revolves around human trafficking, kind of, because in this world, the Cocanian species, I guess it's not even the right word, but the Cocanian species is dying out because they don't have enough women. And so a couple of radicals go out and basically kidnap women from Earth because they are compatible with Cocanians. So it's very much taboo, I would want to say, in its elements. And so this one follows our main 2 characters, Luca and Alice, and they meet at one of these bunkers, I guess is the best way to describe it. And it's all in this world, and it takes place in this world where mates are a thing, but they have not been around for a very, very long time. So they're just starting to come back. And so we've got all these different stories between all these different people. And I love the first one, so I'm excited to see about this one because they're relatively shorter stories, but I'm nervous going into this one because Choosing Theo is so good. I'm afraid nothing can compare to it. But I want to continue with the series because I really liked her writing. The next one is Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, which is the sequel to A Discovery of Witches, which I read for that vampire vlog as well. Really loved. It was not quite what I expected in the best way. So I don't own a copy of this. I need to go to my used bookstore and see if I can find a copy of the rest of this trilogy. I know there's more that have been coming out in this series in like the last couple of years, but I want to get through this trilogy first. before I even decide if I want to invest in the rest of it, because I think it's a different set of characters, if I am correct. Either way, this is the sequel. I really enjoyed the first one. It's been marketed almost as like Twilight for adults is the best way I can describe it, because you do have these two main characters. One is a witch, one is a vampire, and it starts because the witch ends up kind of finding this hidden manuscript that everybody wants. There are three types of creatures. You've got witches, vampires, and demons. And so all of them want this. And so since she found it, everyone's now after her. And this vampire and her create kind of like a bond, and he's there to protect her from all these crazy things. And so it definitely ended on a cliffhanger of sorts from the first one, so I'm curious to see where this one goes. The next one is the one that I want to say I'm probably the least excited about as far as this list goes, even though I really want to get to it. And that is Heart of a Sun Warrior. This is by Sue Tan. This is the sequel to Daughter of the Moon Goddess. There's only 2 books in the series. I really enjoyed Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and I feel like if I remember, it's been a while since I read that one, so I'm gonna have to find a synopsis online. But I remember it kind of having an ending, but then there was an epilogue that could have been more, and this is the more that is happening. But it follows our main character, who's the daughter of a moon goddess, and she ends up having to be sent away from her mom, and she gets sent down to Earth and ends up like working for a prince and like building up herself in the military system. And there's a little bit of a love triangle, and it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of conversation about like humans and gods and goddesses and like the connection between them. It's highly steeped in Asian history and Asian mythology, so the story of the moon goddess is a big part of this world, and that's actually a real story. So this one just continues. I don't really know what I'm getting into with this one. I have to remind myself what the first one was about, but yeah, that's one on here too. And then the last book that's on this list is another companion sequel, which is Beautiful Stranger by Christina Lauren, which is the second book in the Beautiful Bastards series. I have like the first 3, I think. 3 or 4 books in this series, and then like the novellas that go in between them as well. I've been collecting them, and I still haven't continued. This one was actually a gift from my friend Teresa, probably from a couple of years ago. I do apologize. I'm very bad at this, but I'm hoping to get to this one. These are really easy contemporary stories that like you don't have to think a lot about going into them. They are crazy smutty. If it's anything like the first book in the series, the first book was crazy smutty. This one follows someone named Sarah, who we have met previously in the series, and this guy who I'm trying to find his name, Max, and he's kind of like a British playboy, and the two of them strike up a liaison, if you will. And so we've met both of them. We met her in the very first book because she's like the best friend of our main female lead from the first book, and we met him in the novella between the first and the second book. So we met both of them. I'm excited to dive in. I really liked her writing, or their writing, and I would like to continue because I just keep collecting them and then not reading them. So we need to start reading them. And that's it. That is a look at the 15 books that I'm hoping to get to, or at least part of them that I'm hoping to get to this year. Like I said, I'm planning on doing like 1 a month, so hopefully by the end of the year we will have had 12 done, but my goal is 10. I'll be satisfied with 10, because sometimes the reading mood just does not mood, you know? We're just going to dive in and hope for the best. So let me know, as always, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video. I love knowing your thoughts on them, or if you've got some books yourself that you want to read by the end of the year, your own 2024 TBR, let me know what some of those are down below. But if you liked this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so over check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!